Local webcasting for a worldwide audience.
Winter was over and summer coming on, and the meadows were pleasant and gay. I met a fair maid, so sweetly sang she. I thought her the queen of the May. I thought her the queen of the May. I said, my fair maid, how come you so early this morn? Oh, the maid, she replied, to gather some may. For the trees, they are now in full bloom. For the trees, they are now in full bloom. Said, my fair maid, may I walk with you in the meadow so pleasant and gay? Oh no, she replied, that never will do, for I fear you will lead me astray, for I fear you will lead me astray. Gently I took a lily white hand, on the green mossy bank we sat down. I planted a kiss on her sweet ruby lips, while the small birds were singing all around, while the small birds were singing all around. As we rose, she gave me a smile and thanked me for what I had done. I planted a kiss on her sweet ruby lips, and the small birds were singing all around, and the small birds were singing all around. Early next morning I made her my bride, and the people had nothing to say, for the bells they did ring, and the bridesmaids did sing, as I crowned her the Queen of the May, as I crowned her her the Queen of the May.
That was Queen of the May by Belshazzar's Feast, in honour of the supremely talented musician Paul Sartin, who last month tragically died at the age of 51. A critically acclaimed and multi-award-winning English singer, instrumentalist, composer and arranger, specialising in oboe and violin, Sartin was a founder member of folk band Bellowhead, the three-piece Faustus and the folk duo Belshazzar's Feast. Our thoughts are with his family and friends during this difficult time.
We are Nick and Hannah McMaster of Brighton-based alt-folk band The Sweet Ordeal, and this is Finding Land Folk Show, music from the shores of folk. Welcome.
Welcome.
Whether you're steeped in the genre, like Nick, a toe dipper forever, like me, or joining the journey for the first time, we are delighted that you can join us for a very special, wait for it, extended episode. An extended episode, Nick, are you excited?
I'm really excited to share this, Hannah, and also, because of the amount of work that was put into this show, I'm also extremely knackered.
Knackered, you say? Well, I mean, being knackered, that makes it sound like you write and edit the show all by yourself. I'm saying no more. And I'm assuming neither are you from that look. This show, anyway, this special extended show, this celebrates the release this month of what will undoubtedly be seen as a landmark album in the folk genre, The Sorrow Songs, Folk Songs of Black British Experience, by Cornwall-based singer, songwriter and multi-instrumentalist Angeline Morrison. Nick was lucky enough to interview Angeline for this show, which we have interspersed with song choices from Angeline, as well as our own curated selection. To start us off is Magnet, a one-off band who was specially formed to play the film soundtrack to the British folk horror classic The Wicker Man. And Nick, I mean, I've got to say, if you're being asked to specially form a band just to play for one film, you can't get better than The Wicker Man, and that's the film you want to be formed to play for.
The only other film I can think of where I'd want to be in a specially formed band to play the soundtrack would maybe be The Sex Lives of the Potato Men.
Yes, you would. We have compared Angeline's sound with Magnet in a previous episode, and Nick was delighted to learn that Angeline loves the film and took that as the greatest compliment she could get. So this is the beautiful Willows song.
Gentle as a feather, I'll catch a rainbow from the sky and tie the ends together. Hey things I'll show to you. Would you have a wondrous sight? The midday sun at midnight. Smooth and stroke your head. How a maid can stroke a bucketful.
I mean, she was a brilliant singer, that Britt Ekland, wasn't she? I mean, I'm assuming it was her singing it, was it not, Mick?
Well, she also had a body double in that film.
She did indeed.
Indeed. And you know what, Hannah? If you had a body double in a film, I think it would be Kim Kardashian.
Well, thank
Although only one side of her, of
Unbelievable.
course.
Well, I mean, that's the only bit you need in The Wicker Man, because it was mainly focused on her bottom, wasn't it?
No, indeed. I think my body double in the film would be Timmy Mallet.
I think so.
Birmingham-born Angeline Morrison is a musician in the weird folk tradition who creates dark, haunted folk music. Alongside her undoubted musical talent, Angeline also stands out as a black musician in folk who has been shining the light on the place of people of colour in British history, rediscovering, retelling and recreating their stories.
She has done this through two striking standout albums, both released this year. The first album, The Brown Girl and Other Folk Songs, a collection of 10 traditional songs, is an intimate listen, musically sparse but full of depth and warmth. While most of the subject matter does not deal with explicitly black protagonists, the song, The Brown Girl, feels as if it anchors the rest in that experience, creating layers of meaning and complexity that the best folk songs do when sung through a distinct voice and perspective.
The second album released this month is The Sorrow Songs, folk songs of black British experience. From the evidence of the two songs on the Black John single release, the sound is fuller and perhaps, in stark contrast to some of the lyrics, lighter and lilting, aided by the talented multicultural ensemble of Cohen Braithwaite Kilcoyne on Anglo-concertina and vocals, Hamilton Gross on violin and vocals, Clark Camilleri on banjo, guitar and vocals, Rosie Crow on piano, Mary Woodvine on vocals, Alex Nilsson on drums and the legendary Eliza Carthy on violin, who also produced the album. Comprising of original material, The Sorrow Songs profoundly and vividly tells the stories of Morrison's black ancestors who have been denied a voice and marginalised within British history. I started off our interview by asking Angeline about her rather unusual entry into folk music. Angeline, welcome to Finding Land Folk Show.
Hi Nick, thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here.
From what I know of your biography, you immediately strike me as having had an unusual entry into folk music. You were born in Birmingham, but now live in Cornwall, a place I read you fell in love with at the age of 16 after witnessing a May Day Obios festival in Padstow. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, the Padstow Obios is amazing. Cornwall has many folk traditions that are very much alive and well, and the May Day traditions include the Obios of Padstow and Ferry Day of Helston, which is also known as Florida. And I found out about the Obios and was determined that I had to see it because I became really fascinated with the idea of very, very ancient sort of ritual practices and traditions, which was so very ancient that nobody really knew exactly where they came from or what they may have originally meant, but that was still current and still alive and still being practiced by people and had been practiced, by everyone in living memory and all of their relatives and ancestors as well. It's just so powerful to me. And when I first went to Padstow, I just remember the sound of the drums, and it almost like being surrounded by heartbeats. It was so magical. And that's when I fell in love with Cornwall and decided I wanted to live here.
So, Nick, let us dive deeper into the Obios Festival. It involves two processions making their way around the town, each containing an eponymous hobby horse known as the Obios. Mm-hmm. The festival starts at midnight on May Eve when townspeople gather outside the Golden Lion Inn to sing the night song. By morning, the town has been dressed with greenery and flowers placed around the maypole. The excitement begins with the appearance of one of the Obioses. Male dancers cavort through the town dressed as one of two Obioses, the Old and the Blue Ribbon or Methodist Obios.
And Hannah each wears a mask and black frame hung cape under which they try to catch young maidens.
But it's always, all of these things always boil down to trying to capture young maidens under your cape. So it sounds a little bit like our first date.
As they pass through the town, prodded on by assistants known as teasers.
Sounding even more like our first date.
And followed by a band. Finally, late in the evening, the two Osses meet at the maypole before returning to their respective stables, where the crowd sings of the Obby Oss's death until his resurrection the following May Eve. Capturing the chaos and character of this festival, we have two songs about the Obios, and the first is by the high-energy Cornish Celtic folk band Black Friday, led by Tom O'Reilly.
On the 1st of May, on a sunny day, we went down through the streets, looking for the Oss, a little to drink. We could hear the proud drum beats. Oh, the Ossie, Ossie, old, Ossie, old, Obby Oss. Oh, the Ossie, Ossie, old, Ossie, old, Obby Oss. Last on that fine day, we danced in the sun. Cornish hearts lifted by the beating of the drums, of the drums, of the drums. Colours of gold and colours of bold, our hearts it did beguile. Last when that fine day we danced in the sun. Cornish hearts lifted by the beating of the drums, of the drums, of the drums. With girls so bright we danced all night down by the harbour wall. We touched a skirt and we lost our hearts, our past our love they call. They passed when that fine day we danced in the sun. Cornish hearts lifted by the beating of the drums, of the drums, of the drums, of the drums, of the drums. Hey, 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 ho! said no. Oh, the Osceola, Osceola, Bias. Oh, the Osceola, Osceola, Bias. In Pasto, in that fine day, we gasped in the sun. Cornish hearts lifted by the beating of the drums, of the drums, of the drums, of the drums, of the drums. Oh, the Osceola, Osceola, Bias. Oh, the Osceola, Osceola, Bias. Oh, the Osceola, Osceola, Bias. Oh, the Osceola, Osceola, Bias.
Unite and unite, for summer is a common today. Unite and unite, in the merry morning of May, with the merry ring, for summer is a common today. Adieu the merry spring, in the merry morning of May. Rise up, rise up, rise up, rise up, rise up, Mr. Shine. Summer, summer, summer,
Bringing in the May.
Unite and unite and let us all unite, for summer is a common today. Oh, whither we are going, we will all unite in the merry morning of May. Unite and unite and let us all unite, for summer is a common today. Oh, whither we are going, we will all unite in the merry morning of Oh, where is Saint George? Oh, where is he? He's out in his longboat, all on the salt sea. Up flies the kite, down falls the log, Aunt Ursula Birdhood, she had an old yow, and she died in her own park. Oh.
Obios by Black Friday and Padstow May Song by South London folk singer, songwriter, fiddle player and multi-instrumentalist Lisa Knapp, who, unlike Angeline, came to folk music later on in life, after spending her teenage years going to raves and dancing to hip-hop records.
Hannah,
Yes, Nick.
how did you spend your teenage years? Because sources tell me that it was mainly dressed as an Edwardian freak show.
Yeah, you wouldn't be far off. I also spent it sort of listening to a lot of Marillion, Fish-era Marillion, which put me in great stead when I was to meet an older man, an older gentleman, let's say, who was quite impressed by my encyclopedic knowledge of Fish-era Marillion. Here, Nick asks Angeline about how she first found folk.
So you're 16 and in Birmingham. Where does your interest in folklore come from?
Well, that happened quite a lot earlier. I was just playing quite happily in the house as a child of about maybe 7 or 8, and my parents were listening to, I think it was Radio 4. There was just a lot of boring adults talking, and then suddenly there was this exquisite voice, and I'd never heard anything like it. And I later found out, many years later, that it was Shirley Collins, and she was singing Our Captain Pride, which is one of the songs that I decided to record on the Brown Girl and Other Folk Songs album. But just this incredible voice that sounded like it was coming from another world, and everything about it was so magical and so exotic. I'd never heard that sort of purity in a human voice, and it was completely unaccompanied, and it sounded so pure and sounding quite exposed and vulnerable. It was also incredibly earthy and strong, and there were such lovely melodic shifts in it, and this really unusual language and words that I hadn't really heard before, and words that were pronounced in really intriguing ways, like the word jewel. She sang it jewel, and then the rhyme of pools was pronounced jewel, and I was completely intoxicated. So that was really where my love of folk music began, and I started just finding out as much as I possibly could after that, and just burying myself in it, and the folklore came along with that at the same sort of pace.
Your genesis story, as it were, is really interesting, and taking into account where you've taken your own art, when you first heard these strange and magical sounds, did you feel in any way separated from it because of your own cultural background, or did it speak to you because of that?
I felt an immediate oneness with it. Honestly, I felt really swept up in the magic. I felt like there was no separation between myself and this incredible song. And I'm talking about Our Captain Pride by Shirley Collins that I heard on the radio that time. It was a really immersive experience. It was almost spiritual. And I have always felt a very close bond with the music and with the songs and with the folklore. And other people of colour will say the same, actually, who love the folk music of these islands. And the sort of sense of that questioning of, is it really okay for me to sing these songs? Do I fit in here? Is this all right? And that sense of discomfort around that didn't happen until I started really going to folk clubs and immersing myself in the scene and noticing that I always seemed to be the odd one out. And this was whilst being very much accepted. The folk community is a very, very accepting place, isn't it? And it's famous for it, and it's famous for friendliness and just being a warm place to be. So that's something that was always very clear. I was never made to feel like I was in the wrong place by any of the other people there. But I really stood out. There wasn't anybody else like me singing these songs or even listening to them.
That's really interesting that in your experience you felt welcome within a genre of music that's often, seemed to be tied to a very Anglo-centric or white culture, but you felt welcome within that. But I think from reading about how you developed your latest album, really, it's not so much the folk music that was enclosed away from you. It was the history that sometimes folk covers that did not shine a light on the long-standing history of black people in this country.
Yes, and it's a bigger picture issue, isn't it? The issue of the lack of awareness around black history in this country and in these islands. And I'm happy to say that it is changing slowly. It's definitely changing for the better. What I hope to do in this very small way with this album is to help increase awareness of the fact that still surprises some people, when I talk to them about it, and maybe you find the same. Many people are still surprised to learn that there were black people present and living in these islands before the middle of the 20th century, and that they were not all enslaved people or people in servitude, and they were not all poor people, and they did not all conform to the kinds of stereotypes or stereotypical images of blackness that are so often presented to us.
Our captain cried, all hands away tomorrow, leaving us girls behind in grief and sorrow. What makes you go abroad, fighting for strangers, when you could stay at home and free from dangers? I'd roll you in my arms, my dearest jewel, so stay at home with me and don't be cruel. She fell upon the floor like one that was dying. This house was filled with grief, sighing and crying. You courted me a while just to deceive me. Now that you've gained my heart, you mean to leave me. For there's no trusting man, not my own brother. So girls, if you would love, love one each other. The drums are beating, love, the pipes are playing. I must be on my way, no longer staying. Dry off those brandy tears and leave off weeping, and happy we shall be at our next meeting.
That was The Captain Cried by Shirley and Dolly Collins from their 1969 album Anthems in Eden on the Harvest label, with Shirley on vocals and Dolly on portative organ. Shirley, resident of Lewes, who of course famously retired from music in the 1970s, only to resurface to much critical acclaim with 2016's Lodestar album.
In 1993, David Tibet of the experimental folk band Current 93 released a compilation of her songs entitled Fountain of Snow on his Dirto label. Since then, she has appeared on a number of Current 93 recordings, including covering the American traditional lullaby All the Pretty Little Horses, one of several versions they did. Here is Current 93 with All the Pretty Little Horses, this time in the company of Nick Cave.
Hush-a-bye, don't you cry, go to sleepy little baby, go to sleepy little baby. When you wake, you shall have all the pretty little horses, all the pretty little horses. Blacks and bays and dapples and greys, all the pretty little horses. Way down yonder meadow lies a poor little lambie. Bees and butterflies flitting round his eyes. Poor little thing is crying, mammy. Go to sleep, don't you cry. Rest your head upon the clover. Rest your head upon the clover. In your dreams you shall ride while your mammy's watching over. Flaxen days and dapples and grays, all the pretty little horses, all the pretty little horses, all the pretty little horses.
Before we go on to your first music choice, you describe about how you discovered yourself folk music through Shirley Collins and then getting interested through the Obios Festival into folklore. What's your own musical background in terms of music you were exposed to as a child, and when did you start actually playing music yourself?
Well, it's funny because I don't remember a time when I didn't write music, actually. I'm always making up songs in my head, and songs were a way for me of understanding the world and making sense of the world around me. And I would also sing to myself. If somebody had upset me at school or whatever, I'd go away by myself and just sing under my breath very quietly. And it seemed to calm me down. And I since found out, actually, that singing helps to re-regulate a dysregulated nervous system. It actually does your body good to sing. So I was always singing. My family were always walking around the house singing and not kind of even realising that they were doing it. From a very early age, we had loads of Jamaican music, that was the main music, and loads and loads and loads of really excellent soul music. I love soul music. I think if you are a music lover, you are never confined to just one genre. It doesn't make sense to me, the idea that somebody would love and make music in just one genre. So I really love soul as well. And my mum's devotion to Sam Cooke is something that I'm really glad of, because he was an amazing songwriter. I'm very grateful for my early education in songwriting.
Lord, I'm poor pilgrim of sorrow, down in this world I'm all alone. I have no hope for tomorrow, and I have no place that I can roam. Sometimes I'm so lonely. Sometimes I don't know what to do. I look around to friends for consolation, and I find that they have troubles too. And I got sisters and brothers, they don't like me because I'm away from sin. And I've got good friends, my best friends, they turn against me because I'm trying so hard to win. But roll on, Lord, come on, Jesus, and roll on. Sometimes I'm both toasted, Lord, and driven, till I decided that That's when I heard of a city called Glory. And well, trying to make that city mine.
Beautiful.
Beautiful.
Pilgrim of Sorrow by Sam Cooke and the legendary gospel group The Soul Stirrers, from the album The Two Sides of Sam Cooke, released by Speciality Records in 1970, 4 years after his death. Now, I don't think you could title your album that anymore, could you? Because the pun would be lost now with Spotify and CDs and all of that.
You're right.
Isn't it? Couldn't do it. Couldn't do all those album puns that we've lost because of Spotify.
I suppose it would now be the algorithms of Sam Cooke.
Absolutely.
Sounds like you have a lot of inspiration there, and I must say, actually, I think your voice does carry a lot of soul with it. Just to pick up, I really like your point about how music can kind of help positively regulate the body. And I get a feeling from the two songs I've heard from your new album, which do have a fuller sound. It feels like, although the subject matter sometimes darker, they do feel like songs that could be sung by others or communally. And I think that also adds to a greater sense of well-being.
I'm so happy to hear you say that, Nick. Thank you. I'm so delighted that you think these songs are singable and that you can hear groups of people singing them, because that is my absolute biggest dream for the album, is that people will want to sing the songs, and that maybe there'll be songs that become, quite normal to sing in folk clubs. I really wanted to make sure that the songs had a hook or a refrain or a chorus or somewhere where you could join in and harmonise in the way that we love to do in folk clubs. And the other thing that I would really love is if these songs get sung, then it means that people will remember the characters in them, and people will be more aware or more mindful that, yes, we do have a historic black presence in these islands. Because I think that when people have songs about them, those people are remembered, aren't they?
Absolutely. And I think almost you've created the perfect storm of songs that can be sung out loud by others or communally, but also creating lyrics, stories and narratives that are really important to hear but will be remembered. So I think, you may be adding to the traditional canon that'll be sung by future generations. And let's crack on with some of your work then, and tell me about your song choice, number one, which is Clouds Never Move, which was a single from 2020.
It's a very, very short song, and I wrote that in the aftermath of George Floyd's murder. And there was such horror in the world and so much grief and anger. And that song, I consider that to be my first anti-racist folk song, I guess. What it's about is a memory from preschool. And I was watching clouds with a little friend of mine who was also an extremely serious child like me, and we were watching the clouds together, and my little friend said, "Clouds never move," and she said that with such incredible confidence and certainty and sureness, and that statement that clouds never move made me feel as though, even though I could see them moving, I felt unable to contradict her. So the message of that song is to encourage people to speak their truth, even when there are very loud voices all around them.
She said the clouds never ever ever move. Come watch a while, she said, and I will have no need to prove. The tract of light grows dim, it creeps across the wall. but somehow I can't say adore Helen. If you look into the sun, you'll see his heart is blue. You know this when the clouds turn tail, they show the silver linings actually gold. Gold.
I met my love by the gasworks wall. Dreamed a dream by the old canal. I kissed my girl by the factory wall. Dirty old town, dirty old town. Clouds are drifting across the moon. Cats are prowling on their beat. Springs a girl from the streets at night. Dirty old town, dirty old town. The smoky wind, dirty old town, dirty old town. I'm gonna make me a picture box, shining steel, tempered in the fire. I'll chop you down like an old Dutch tree. Dirty old town, dirty old town. I met my love by the gasworks wall. Dreamed a dream by the old canal. I kissed my girl by the factory wall. Dirty old town, dirty old town, dirty old town, dirty old town.
We've just heard Clouds Never Move by our guest Angeline Morrison, followed by Ewan McCall's Dirty Old Town by Celtic folk punk band The Pogues from their seminal 1985 album Rum, Sodomy and the Lash, one of my favourite album titles of all time.
And one of my favourite album covers.
Yes, indeed.
Speaking of rum, sodomy and a lash, I imagine that was your life before we met. But now, Hannah, do you know if the Pogues made a follow-up album to Rum, Sodomy and the Lash and based on your current lifestyle, do you know what it would be called?
Tell me now.
Real Ale, Bus Home and Falling Asleep on the Sofa to Top of the Pop reruns.
I like that. Yes, I mean, that's very accurate.
I'm not sure if the album cover would be very good. And Hannah, reflecting on the conversation with Angeline about the power of communal singing, I have to say that Dirty Old Town has to be one of the greatest folk sing-along songs ever.
Yes, along with the Cheeky Girls, Touch My Bum, This Is Life.
And one I remember doing in my middle school choir. Now, I wrote that sentence before you mentioned the Cheeky Girls.
Well, so I'm going to ask now, was it Cheeky Girls or the Pogues? Carrying on with the interview, Nick picks up on the theme of Clouds Never Move and asks Angeline about being a black musician in the largely white genre of British folk music.
When you were talking about your songs Clouds Never Move, you were talking about kind of a metaphor that encourages people to speak their own truth when there are other loud voices around. So that, I think, leads me to my next question in a way. You're a black artist working in a genre of music largely associated with white voices. And you've spoken about your experience as being good, actually, personally. But do you feel you have a responsibility as a black artist in this genre to do something more with your art?
Yes, I'm one of a growing number of black artists and other artists of colour who love and play and perform the folk music of these islands. So I think that it's not really the case. There has been a misperception that we don't exist for rather a long time, I think. But actually, we are very much here and very much playing music. And I definitely have a responsibility to my fellow folk artists of colour to help raise their profile and to show people that it's not a contradiction in terms. It's perfectly natural. Folk music is folk music. Lots of people love it. And there are many, many ways to be English or to be British.
Yellow mellow, don't forget where you came from, love. Don't you forget to remember when your days were ice cold. Sugar rainbow, you've not been here before. Take a bite, open wide, this here we can't ignore. Let the colors run wild. Hold my hand and never let go. We'll be alright. Spinning faster than a tornado. We'll be alright. Straight and now on the road. And we'll be alright. It all just comes so natural to be with you. Scary, I know. Feeling a little difficult. Feeling a little like I don't wanna get off. Will this ever end? I know that we can't pretend it'll go forever, but while we're here, let's go again. Let the colors run wild. Hold my hand and never let go. We'll be alright. Spinning faster than a tornado. We'll be alright. Straight and now on the road. And we'll be alright. It all just
That was Joyride, a 2020 single by South East London singer-songwriter Marie Bashiru, and is a recommendation of Angeline. What I note from the majority of the black folk musicians I am aware of, and admittedly that is still quite a small number, is that they have really broadened the genre to incorporate other musical forms. This matches Angeline's experience of listening to soul, for example, and being inspired by Sam Cooke. It either shows how folk can incorporate a wide palette, or that these emerging artists are brave and bold enough to refuse to be pigeonholed and are confident including folk, which in this country can be seen as a more conservative genre, into their sounds. But whilst Angeline's black folk contemporaries draw on more modern musical styles outside of these islands, Angeline, perhaps uniquely, has over these two albums created a body of work that mainly looks inwards and treads the fertile ground of traditional English folk. This is clearly evidenced in her first album of 2022, The Brown Girl and Other Folk Songs. And I ask her about how that album came about.
I've had all of these traditional songs in my head for ages, and I wanted to make a solo album of completely traditional material. I have recorded traditional songs before, but never a full solo album of them. And I had some gigs coming up, and I needed to make something relevant to sell, and something that was more kind of recent or more up to date, and that bridged the gap between now and the Sorrow songs coming out. So I thought, well, I can record all these traditional songs that I know so well because I've been kind of rehearsing them in my head and singing them in folk clubs for ages, and I can do that really quickly. And as it happened, I got so obsessed with it and so kind of drawn in to the detail, I couldn't leave it alone. I was working on it all day and all night, maybe a couple of weeks. Just got so obsessed with it, and so it's really had all my love, this album. And what started out as a practical solution to the problem of me not having a recent enough album to sell at my gigs ended up getting into the official folk albums chart.
Tell me about your second song choice, which is off The Brown Girl and Other Stories. It's Lucy Wan.
Lucy Wan, yeah. That's Row 234 and Child 51, and it is an incest ballad. So I'm somebody who doesn't really shy away from dark material. It's such an incredibly moving, heartbreaking song. It's so full of feeling, and I wanted to try and embody the feeling. It's a very rare song in terms of the English tradition. Lucy Wan, which is also known as Lizzie Wan, Lizie, or Rosie-Anne, in some traditions, or some variants, I should say. The song is very unusual in the English tradition because it's in the Lydian or Fa mode. And the melody that I'm singing it to on this track is not. It's a different melody, which I learned from the singing of you and Nicole. And I loved it because I felt that this melody, it just embodied the pure sorrow of the whole situation. And yes, and also Kate Bush wrote a version of this, which became her song The Kick Inside. So her original version of The Kick Inside was called Lizzie Wants, and the song is also an incest ballad, The Kick Inside. So it's been a very influential song all round.
I've pulled down my lace and the chills. Ooh, do you know you have the face of a genius? I'll send your love to Zeus. Oh, by the time you read this, I'll be well in touch, giving it all in a moment or two. I'm giving it all in a moment. we cry that the mythology be real. I will come home again, but not until the sun and the moon meet on yon hill. I'm giving it all in a moment or two. I'm giving it all in a moment for you. I'm giving it all, giving it, giving it, giving it. This kicking here inside makes me leave you behind. No more under the quilt to keep you warm. Your sister, I was born. You must lose me like an arrow shot into the killer's storm. Pull down my lace and the tunes. Ooh, do you know you have the face ingenious? I'll send your love to Zeus. Oh, by the time we leave.
Fair Lucy, she sits in her father's bower, a-weeping and making moan. And by there came her own brother dear. What ails thee, Lucy one? Why ail and I ail, dear brother, she cried, and I'll tell you the reason why. There is a child between my two sides, that's for you, dear brother, and I. He's taken up his good broadsword that hung down by his knee, and he's cut off fair Lucy one's head, and her poor body in three. Oh, I've cut the head off my greyhound, and I pray that you'll pardon me. Oh, that is not the blood of our greyhound, but the blood of our Lucy. And what will you do when your father comes to know? My son, come, tell unto me. I'll go and dress myself in a new suit of blue, and I'll sail for a far country. And what will you do with your houses and your land? My son, come, tell unto me. Oh, I shall leave them all to my children so small, by one, by two, by three. And when shall you turn to your own wife again? My son, come, tell unto me. when the sun and the moon meet over yonder hill. And I hope that that will never, never be.
You heard The Kick Inside by Kate Bush from her 1978 album of the same name, followed by Lucy Wan by Angeline Morrison. As discussed in the interview, Lucy Wan is an incest or murder ballad. The heroine is pregnant with her brother's child. Her brother murders her and tries to pass off the blood as that of some animal he had killed, and depending on the version sung, this will include one or all of his greyhound, his falcon and his horse. In the end, he must admit that he murdered her, and so he sets sail in a ship never to return. It's the patriarchy again, isn't it? Just getting away with it. He does all that, murders her, murders all the animals, and then kind of has to admit it, but kind of just goes off in a boat, and it's all okay.
It's probably really sad that he had to murder his greyhound, though.
Unbelievable.
I feel, do I have to apologise on behalf of all men?
If you would, please.
Let's, however, return to the interview, and here I ask if it is important for Angeline to sing both traditional songs, as she does on The Brown Girl and other folk songs, and also write and perform original material, as she does on the Sorrow Songs, folk songs of Black British experience.
It's very important to me. It feels very natural for me to sing ancient and traditional material. It also feels very natural for me to compose new material, which is going to be inflected, musically and sonically by all the traditional material that I listen to and love. But as a folk musician, part of folk music is always making and creating new things. And it's important to remember that even the most ancient songs were new at some point. At some point along the way, that was a new song that somebody had written or a new story that somebody had told. And if you believe, as I do, that tradition is a living thing and that it's very much alive and continually changing, as all living things are, and that involves new creations.
Suppose you screeve or go cheek jack or fake the broads or fix a nag or thimble rig or nop a yak or pitch a snide or smash a rag. Suppose you duff or nose and lag or get the straight and land your pot. How'd you melt the multi-swag? Boozing the blowns, cop the lot. Boozing the blowns, cop the lot. Fiddle or fence or mace or mac or moscaneur or flash a drag. They'd lurk a crib or do a crack. Pad of a slang or chuck a mag. Bonnet or tout or mump and gag. Rattle the tats or mark the spot. You cannot bank a single stag. The booze and the blowns cop the lot. Booze and the blowns cop the lot. Suppose you try a different tack and on the square you flash your flag. At penny a line and make you whack. Or with the mummers mug and gag. For nix a dibs your bag. At any graft no matter what. Your merry goblin soon bag. Booze and the blowns cop the lot. Booze and the blowns cop the lot. It's up the spout and Charlie wag with wipes and tickers and whatnot until the squeezer nips you scrag. Booze and the blowns cop the lot. Booze and the blowns cop the lot. Suppose you screeve or go cheek jack or fake the broads or fix a nag or thimble rig or nap a yak or pitch a snide or smash a rag. Suppose you duff or nose and lag or get the straight and land your pot. How'd you melt the multi-swag? Booze and the blowns cop the lot. Booze and the blowns cop the lot. Fiddle or fence or mace or mac or mosquino or flash a drag. They'd lurk a crib or do a crack. Pad of a slang or chuck a mag. Bonnet or tout or mump and gag. Rattle the tats or mark the spot. You cannot bank a single stag. Booze and the blowns will cop the lot. Booze and the blowns cop the lot. Suppose you try a different tack and on the square you flash your flag. A penny a line and make you whack. Or with the mummers mug and gag. For nix a dibs your bag. At any graft no matter what. Your merry goblin cinch your bag. Booze and the blowns cop the lot. Booze and the blowns cop the lot. It's up the spout and Charlie wag with wipes and tickers and whatnot until the squeezer nips you scrag. Booze and the blowns cop the lot. Booze and the blowns cop the lot.
When the hours
songs there from a band like Angeline, who are equally adept at interpreting traditional as creating original songs, all the while maintaining a distinct identity. They are, of course, the peerless stick in the wheel.
We are not worthy. We are not worthy.
We really aren't. They are fabulous. The first track, Villain's Song, from their 2020 album Hold Fast, is their reinterpretation of William Ernest Henley's 1887 translation of Villain's Straight Tip to All Cross Coves from 15th century French poet François Villon, a thief and a murderer who wrote verse when serving out his various prison sentences. It makes me think about because we often hear in folk, about, rogue murderers and cads and, folk heroes who sort of end up, they're serving time in prison for heinous crimes and things like that. Well, that's not the case now, is it? They're just wrong uns and bad uns, aren't they? When was there, in the 15th, 16th, 17th and 18th century, there was, something quite romantic about some cads in prison. Why is that? Why is that now and not why is that then and not now?
I don't know, to be honest, but I think it just went downhill after Adamant.
Yeah, maybe. The second track, an original composition, Follow Them True, a beautiful song that is from their 2018 album of the same name, which the band explain is about rituals and cycles and how we are condemned to make the same mistakes of the past. I hope that's not true, Nick, because that means I'll kind of end up having to go back to Bexhill.
And I know someone else who keeps making the same mistakes of the past.
Who's that?
Producer Ben. He keeps letting us back into Radio Lewis.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does.
The past, of course, is very prevalent in the albums we have been covering, in that Angeline has either reinterpreted traditional songs or created songs that appear a part of that tradition. I asked her how the latter came about with her album, The Sorrow Songs.
I was very lucky enough to get an Arts Council award for the research and the making of this album. And it's a restoring of our often hidden and often forgotten black history of the UK into a series of songs which are brand new songs that I've composed about real historic black lives in these islands. And I wanted them to sound as much as possible like UK folk songs. And the reason for that is not just because I love the songs, but because I couldn't find any stories that seemed to talk about black lives or the lives of people of colour. I couldn't find any of those. That's not to say that there never were any, but that those that were there have not survived for whatever reason, and I was unable to find them. And the couple of references that I did find were not positive. So that was the one reason why I wanted to compose these songs. And second of all, I wanted to compose these songs in the style of traditional music, because this music is associated with the past. And I felt that if I can set these stories in a musical style which is associated with history and with the past, then that in itself would make a really deep point about the fact that even though there is still not a universal awareness about the UK's black history, nevertheless it's there, it's real. I wanted to do my little bit to help make that information and those people's lives more accessible.
As I was going to Birmingham town not many years ago, a strange thing it did happen which I'd have you all to know. As I walked along the road down by the old railway, I met two rakish young lads, these words to me did say. One rogue he says, me fine young lad, now list what I do say, or else this very day will be a last. We've played this game before, so hand over all your store, and then perhaps young man will let you past, will let you past, and then perhaps young man will let you past. The first rogue, he turned to me and this he did declare: hand to me your money and it's then your life will spare. So then up spoke the second road, these words to me did say, hand over your fine clothing and we'll let you on your way. So I plucked up my courage, I gave them this reply, I'll give to you £200, or if you spare me life, likewise me store of gold and coins, I'll throw those in as well. But you won't get my fine clothing, no, I'll keep that for myself. One rogue he says, me fine young lad, now list what I do say, or else this very day will be a last. We played this game before, so hand over all your store, and then perhaps young man will let you pass, will let you pass, and then perhaps young man will let you pass. So then up comes the constable to try and save the day. What's the matter here, young man? The constable did say, these rakish robbers, they've come to rob me money and me clothes. I'm hoping that you'll help me. Now what do you suppose? Well, I'm sorry for to tell you, these lads, they've done no wrong. They're in their right to stop you just as you was coming along. For you see, there is a statute, the latest Act's decree. If a countryman to Birmingham goes, he's fit to rob, you see. One rogue, he says, me fine young lad, now list what I do say, or else this very day will be a last. We played this game before, so hand over all your store, and then perhaps young man will let you pass, will let you pass, and then perhaps young man will let you pass. So come all of you fine country lads, and a warning by me take, never go to Birmingham town and make my dear mistake. For it's if you do, you'll meet my fate, and then there you'll be, as you walk the streets of Birmingham, the victim of robbery. One rogue he says, me fine young lad, now list what I do say, or else this very day will be a last. We played this game before, so I hand over all your store, and then perhaps young man will let you pass, will let you pass, and then perhaps young man will let you pass.
That was Countryman in Birmingham by Cohen Braithwaite Kilcoyne, a musician of colour who also works within the English tradition. These original lyrics are partly built on a story that people from Birmingham were legally allowed to rob outsiders who visited the city, whilst the tune is called The Farmers and the Cow.
That's like the Chester bylaw that I think is still there for some reason, because no one's ever thought of cancelling it, that was sort of around in the Middle Ages, that you could legally shoot a Welshman inside the city walls of Chester if they were there after midnight.
Well, I guess Uber then are doing a roaring trade just before 12, going out of the city limits.
I think they might be. Braithwaite Kilcoyne is also one of the musicians on Angeline's The Sorrow Songs, alongside the magnificent and legendary Queen of the Whirl, Eliza Carthy, who ended up both producing and playing violin on her album. Nick asked Angeline how Eliza became involved.
How it came about was through an app called Clubhouse. I got into that in lockdown. Somebody recommended it, and you can scroll through and find different rooms. And I found a folk room that was run by Eliza Carthy, and I thought, oh, this will be good. So I began to join the folk room on Wednesday nights. It was the highlight of my week, and we'd all take it in turns to sing and chat. And during that time, I had received the Arts Council funding, so I'd started the research and composition phase of the Sorrow Songs. So I would bring some of the very, very early murmurings or embryonic forms of these songs to the folk club, and I'd sing them. And Eliza loved the songs, and she loved the idea of the project as well. She was really enthusiastic about the concept and felt that it was very important, and she actually offered to produce the album.
Shades of Kate Bush in the vocal delivery there, I think.
Absolutely. That was a rollicking song. I really enjoyed that.
From her 2017 album Big Machine, that was Eliza Carthy and the Wayward Band with Devil in the Machine. As mentioned at the top of the show, that whilst Eliza was the producer, a number of musicians involved in the Sorrow Songs album were musicians of colour. I asked her why it was important to invite and involve a multicultural ensemble on this project.
I wanted to put together a very multicultural band. They are all people who are English or British in a variety of ways. So that was the point. They didn't all need to be people of colour, but everybody's heritage is diverse and multiple. So that was important to me. I did want to have as many black folk musicians as I could for the recording and the live project, for obvious reasons, because of the subject matter, because of the absences. And I feel like that's a really positive thing to do for the folk community, is to gather as many folk musicians of colour as I can.
More and more, that's all I'm living for. More and more, don't ever see me poor when I've got more and more and more and more. I want more. One breath was all that I needed to walk this world and make my way. Then to my mother I pleaded, feed my soul for another day. More and more, that's all I'm living for. More and more, don't ever see me poor when I've got more and more and more and more. I want more. Wasn't brought up a fighter, but the more I fought, the more I won. For that world promised brighter, I'm always chasing that setting sun. More and more, that's all I'm living for. More and more, don't ever see me poor when I've got more and more and more and more. I want more.
Oh, my brown arms, they are sad and empty. Oh, where is my little son? He's stolen away by English slavers. a cudgel blow, and a pointed gun. My riven heart, it is wide with sorrow. Oh, where is my darling boy? Thrust into a sack with babes and younglings by slavers in the king's employ. Luli, my dear babe, where'er you be, may the arms of the ocean be cradle for thee. Ripped, oh so cruel, from his loving mother, my darling babe, to be bored and so, his skin rubbed raw by iron shackles, he gulps foul air in the ship's dank hold. Oh, I'll send my spirit out into the darkness, into stars and the wind and the sea I'll go. My spirit will fly into earth and water, that a mother's love he might then know. Luli, my dear babe, where'er you be, may the arms of the ocean be cradle for thee. If the sea be your bed and the waves be your pillow, may the sun in the sky keep you from all harm. The earth is your mother now, dear baby. She will hold you safe in her soft brown arms. Luli, my dear babe, where'er you be, may the arms of the ocean be cradle for thee. Oh, earth, cradle my son for me. Cradle my son for me. Oh, earth, cradle my son for me. Oh, earth, cradle my son for me.
Clark Camilleri, another of the musicians from the Sorrow Songs, with More and More, a single from his 2020 album, The Rolling Hills of Home, followed by Unknown African Boy, Died 1830, the lead single from the Sorrow Songs by Angeline Morrison, which was developed from a true story of a slave ship that was wrecked near the Isles of Scilly. A local newspaper article at the time lists some of the items washed up on shore. The list includes palm oil, several hundred elephant tusks, a box of silver dollars, 2 boxes of gold dust, and the body of an unknown West African boy, estimated age around 8. The song is told from the perspective of his grieving mother.
As mentioned earlier, this album was preceded by The Brown Girl and Other Folk Songs, and it is from that album that Angeline picked her next song, Idumea. I asked her about this selection.
Okay, well, it's a beautiful song. I first learned this from the singing of the Watersons, and it's a Sacred Harp song. Sacred Harp being an American Christian hymn singing tradition, where it's also known as shape note singing. So instead of like a sort of musical score that you might be used to seeing, the notes have different shapes, and the shape of the note would tell you the intervals. But anyway, this stunning, glorious song is written by Charles Wesley, the Methodist hymn writer. He wrote over 6,500 hymns and was astonishingly talented. So he wrote the lyrics for this, and the music is by Ananias Davison with 2 S's, which I think is one of the best names I've ever heard.
And am I born to die, to lay this body down, and must my trembling spirit fly into a world unknown, and must my trembling spirit fly into a world unknown. A land of deepest shade, unpierced by human thought, the dreary regions of the dead, where all things are forgot, the dreary regions of the dead, where all things are forgot. When as from earth I go, what will become of me? Eternal happiness, oh, must then my portion be. Eternal happiness, oh, must then my portion be. Waked by the trumpet sound, I from my grave shall rise to see the Judge with glory crowned, and see the blazing skies, to see the Judge with glory crowned, and see the blazing skies.
Oh, it's under the leaves and the leaves of life that I saw Maiden 7. It's one of them was Mary mild, was our Lord's mother from heaven. She asked me what was I looking for under the leaves so green. I am looking for sweet Jesus Christ, with his body nailed to a tree. Go you down to yonder's little town, as far as you can see. It's there you'll find sweet Jesus Christ, with his body nailed to a tree. Oh mother, don't you weep for me. Your weeping, it does me some harm. It's I may suffer for you, dear mother, when you are dead and gone. There's a rose and a rose and a genteel rose. The fennel, it grows so white. God will grant us grace in every mortal place to pray to our heavenly guide. God will grant us grace in every mortal place to pray to our heavenly guide.
You've heard Iduna by Angeline Morrison, followed by Under the Leaves of Life by Nick Hart. In her introduction, Angeline mentions that the music was by Virginian singing school teacher and congregational song compiler Ananias Davison, 1780 to 1857, with words by English Methodist leader Charles Wesley, 1707 to 1788, whose biggest banger is probably the carol Hark the Herald Angels Sing. What a tune, Nick.
What a tune. Imagine writing over 6,000 songs. And do you know what, Hannah?
Yep.
I can only think of one thing I've done 6,000 times.
I don't want to know, Nick.
Under the Leaves of Life is from the 2020 album by Nick Hart titled Nick Hart Sings 10 English Folk Songs. Hart is a previous winner of the Cambridge Folk Festival Christian Raphael Prize, winning in 2021. This year, Angeline became the fourth recipient of one of the most significant competitions throughout the country for key emerging talent in the genre of folk music. I asked Angeline to tell me more.
So Christian Raphael, he's been going to the Cambridge Folk Festival ever since he was a baby. He's a young man with very complex disabilities, including learning disabilities, and he really, really loves music. He's a blogger and a self-advocate and someone for whom music is very important. And so each year, Christian and a team of judges choose an artist from the den stage of Cambridge Folk Festival to be awarded this prize, which includes financial support for 12 months and also PR and publicity support and those kinds of really valuable things that are so hard to do if you're kind of a DIY self-representing artist, which so many of us are nowadays. So I was amazed and honoured to win it.
Now, Hannah,
Nick, I know what you're going to ask me.
well, part of your folk education to move you from toe dipping to at least going up to the knees is to embrace the flute. Now, come on, that flute.
That was real flute overload there. You were really pushing the flute on me hard with that song. It was enjoyable. Yes.
One day I am going to nail you into a room, planks across the window, like Nick Cotton had done to him by Pete Bill in the early days of EastEnders.
Yes.
So he could come off heroin.
Yes.
But for you, it will be to come on to flutage.
To flutage. Well, yeah, okay, I'll submit to that. Unbelievable. But it did evoke a sense of a chase of a sparrowhawk. So, I like that. I like the metaphorical music, so to speak. Chase the Sparrowhawk from their 2019 album The Loft Tapes on Shedfield Records by another previous Christian Raphael Prize winner, the Sheffield-based global folk outfit Misra. Back to this year's winner, and Nick asked Angeline to select a single from her new album.
Okay, this is Black John, which is produced by Eliza Carthy, and you can hear her on her famous fiddlesticks, giving that percussive sound, and also on fiddle at the end. And the song is about John Istumclin, who is also known as Jack V, which is his Welsh name, which means Black Jack or Black John. And he is the UK's earliest known black horticulturalist. He was recently honoured with a yellow rose. He was either given as a gift or purchased by a slave-owning family in Wales near Criccieth. And he was brought there at age 7 and very quickly became fluent in English and fluent in Welsh. So as far as I'm aware, he is also possibly our earliest known black fluent Welsh speaker. So he's important for Black History Wales. And he was actually very well loved in his community, as well as having some less than lovely experiences. But he really loved gardening and he loved playing his violin. This song, which I wanted to have quite a joyful tune to honour his violin playing and the fact that he was known to be a very peaceful and gentle sort of man who just loved nothing more than being in his garden. And he married a local Welsh girl called Margaret Griffith, and they had 7 children. So he's got descendants.
Black John makes the garden grow, bloom and blossom flourish. In this land a seed did sow, that never now shall perish. Once I was a happy child at play, it's sometimes hard to remember. Then bright sunlight to the darkest depths gave way. That memory makes me shudder. I cannot help but call to mind the torments that befell me. But as a grown man now I find I am proud Welshman Jack thee. Black John makes the garden grow, bloom and blossom flourish. In this land a seed did sow, that never now shall perish. My love is for the earth and all that grows. I work the land for hours. Come rain or mist, or when the wild wind blows, I tend the plants and flowers. Sometimes when I have finished work, the master's gardens call me. I'd rather be with soil and bark, all in sweet nature's company. Black John makes the garden grow, bloom and blossom flourish. In this land a seed did sow, never now shall perish. I am a man who likes a peaceful life and music on my fiddle. When shadows fall, I dream my own dear wife, sweet smile and tidy middle. Sometimes the maidens in this town for my dark face mislike me, but Margaret's fairest of them all, she'll wed proud Welshman Jack P. Black John makes the garden grow, bloom and blossom flourish. In this land a seed did sow, that never now shall perish. Black John makes the garden grow, bloom and blossom flourish. In this land a seed did sow, that never now shall perish. Black John makes the garden grow.
We end today's show with Angeline's choice of a track by another artist or band that inspires her. So, listener, before we play out the interview, we'll say our goodbyes and hope you've enjoyed this special extended edition.
I know I have.
Absolutely. I think we've learned so much, Hannah, and there's a lot to sit back and absorb.
There's a lot to conjugate on.
Absolutely. Angeline Morrison's The Sorrow Songs, folk songs of Black British experience, is out now on Topic Records. Please check it out. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
This is Air by the Incredible String Band. I absolutely worship and adore the Incredible String Band. This song was released in 1968. It's part of the Wee Tam album from Wee Tam and the Big Huge. And I read such a beautiful story about how this song was written in the book by Rose Simpson, who was a member of the band. And she recently published her memoirs of being in the Incredible String Band. And the book is called Muse Odalisque Handmaiden by Rose Simpson. And she tells a story of herself and Mike Heron, who were in love at the time, and they were in his tiny little house in Roman camps in Scotland, and the sun was streaming through the windows, and they were listening to an album of music from the South Seas, and they prized open the windows. The sunlight streamed in, and it was boiling hot, and this music was just carrying them away. And Rose went out to do some shopping, and when she came back, Mike had composed this song based on one of the South Seas melodies from this album that they'd been listening to earlier.
So, Angeline, thank you so much for joining Finding Land Folk Show. It's been an absolute pleasure to find out more about you, your art, your creativity and your inspirations. I hope you've enjoyed the interview, and I hope I've given you good but thoughtful questions.
Thank you, Nick. It's been so lovely to be on, and thanks for inviting me.
inside of me, close as you can be. You kiss my blood, and my blood kills me. Breathing, all creatures are brighter than brightest star. You are by far. You come right inside of me, close as you can be. You kiss my blood, and my blood kiss me.
Radio Lewis. Local community webcasting.